Hello, welcome everyone. We're so glad that you are here tonight, and welcome to We Are Ill's Understanding and Managing Relapses in Multiple Sclerosis virtual education series. We're so glad you've joined us, but before we get started, we want to make sure you know how to participate and has what you need to fully engage in tonight's conversation. You are welcome to use the chat throughout the program to share your comments or reactions, and you can submit questions through the Q&A feature. If you have a question for our speakers, we encourage you to submit it as we go, as we'll have a dedicated time for participant questions later in the program. Closed captions are available for anyone who would like to use them. You can turn them on using the captioning option within the Zoom controls. The program is being recorded, so by remaining in the session, you acknowledge the recording. Cameras are completely optional, and we want you to participate in whatever way feels the most comfortable. Sharing your personal experiences is also always voluntary. During the session tonight, you'll see a few interactive polls. We encourage you to participate because your responses help us to understand where our community is coming from and help to shape the conversation. Most importantly, this is a space for learning, connection, and questions. We hope you feel we hope you feel comfortable engaging in the ways that work best for you. Now, let's officially get started.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Victoria Reese Brathwaite, founder and CEO of We Are Ill, and I want to personally thank you for joining us today. At We Are Ill, our mission is to improve the quality of life for people living with chronic illness through education, advocacy, support, and community. We envision a future where every person impacted by a chronic illness has access to trusted information, meaningful connections, and the resources they need to thrive, not just survive. Whether you're joining us today as someone living with a chronic illness, a care partner, a family member, community advocate, healthcare professional, or simply someone who wants to learn more, we're so glad you're here. Your presence helps strengthen this community, and we hope today's program provides knowledge, encouragement, and practical tools you can take with you long after we conclude. As you participate today, I encourage you to come with an open heart and an open mind. Ask questions, engage in the conversation, and take advantage of this opportunity to learn from our speakers and from one another. This time was created for you. Before we begin, I'd like to also ask for one important favor. At the conclusion of today's program, please take a few minutes to complete our post-program survey. Your feedback is incredibly valuable. It helps us understand what's working, identify opportunities to better serve our community, measure the impact of our programs, and demonstrate the need for continued investment from our partners and supporters. Every survey completed helps us create more educational programs like this one and expand access for even more individuals and family. On behalf of our entire WeRL team, thank you for choosing to spend your time with us today. We're honored to be a part of your journey and hope you leave today's program feeling more informed, more empowered, and more connected. Welcome to today's We Are Ill program, and let's get started.
So, ladies, tonight is the first part of a two-part conversation designed to move us from understanding to action. However, before we officially begin, we'd like to extend our sincere appreciation to ANI Pharmaceuticals and Novartis, whose generous support helps us to make educational opportunities like this available to our community. We Are Ill is committed to providing culturally relevant, evidence-based education that empowers Black women living with multiple sclerosis to make informed decisions about their health. We'd now like to share a brief message from ANI Pharmaceuticals.
ANI Pharmaceuticals has been in business for nearly 100 years, and from the very beginning, our mission has always been the same: serving patients, improving lives. The story begins in the 1930s when a father-son team tapped freshwater fish in Baudette, Minnesota to produce a therapeutic fish oil that was much higher in vitamins A and D than others. Those initial research and development efforts led to years of expansion, and the company was formalized as ANI Pharmaceuticals in 2001. From these humble beginnings, we have evolved to a fully integrated and diversified US-based biopharmaceutical company. developing, manufacturing, and marketing high-quality branded and generic prescription pharmaceuticals with a rich history of innovation and patient-centric values.
All right. So, in this first session, we are focusing on clarity, learning what a true relapse is, what is a pseudo relapse, and what does progression between relapses mean. How you can begin recognizing meaningful changes in your own body. We are pairing clinical expertise with lived experience because both matter. Our goal is for you to leave tonight saying, I understand what is happening in my body. So let's introduce our panelists. Dr. Jacqueline Rosenthal is a neurologist at the Andrew C. Carlos Multiple Sclerosis Institute at Shepherd Center in Atlanta, Georgia. She earned her medical degree from Morehouse School of Medicine and completed her neurology residency at Madigan Army Medical Center. Following military service as a neurologist, she completed a neuroimmunology fellowship through the Atlanta VA Medical Center and Emory University before joining Shepherd Center in 2019. Dr. Rosenthal is actively involved in clinical research and initiatives that advance multiple sclerosis education and awareness. Our other panelist is Tracy Dunbar. She is an educational leader, special education advocate, consultant, and speaker with more than 20 years of experience supporting students, families, educators, and school communities. Her work is informed by her personal journey living with multiple sclerosis and her family's experience with MS. She is passionate about resilience, advocacy, and empowering others through education while helping individuals feel seen, valued, and equipped to thrive. And so I will turn it over to Dr. Rosenthal. Please give us a brief introduction.
Thank you so much. I'm very excited to be here and speak with everyone and be on this panel tonight. I work at Shepherd Center as a neurologist. I've been there for 7 years now. At our MS Institute, we see primarily MS and a few other neuroimmunologic disorders. But I've been practicing as a board certified neurologist for about 13 years now, focusing on MS for the past 9 years. And for those who have been in that the community for that long or longer, you would know that now it's just a really interesting time. A lot of things evolving, a lot of the things that we're probably going to touch on today. I'm happy to be here, happy to hopefully share some knowledge and help empower people living with MS to better advocate for themselves and understand the disease process they're dealing with. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rosenthal. Tracy, could you please give us a brief introduction?
As mentioned, my name is Tracy Dunbar. I am a person who is living with MS and have been living with MS, formerly diagnosed for the past 8 years. And so I'm glad to be here today to talk and give you a personal lens about MS experiences from my lived experience.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tracy. And so want to remind you all that questions can be submitted throughout our program in the question and answer box at the bottom of your Zoom panel. Um, We will have a protected Q&A time later, but please submit them throughout the program. Also, please remember our discussion today is educational. We want to be informative for everyone, but we also do not want to give individualized medical advice. So please shy away from asking those questions here, but certainly ask general questions about MS, relapse, and so on. We're going to have our first polling question. Please take an opportunity to answer the question. If you need a moment to think about it, we'll leave it up for about a minute so that you can answer. And then afterwards, we will share those results. So the question is, how confident are you right now in knowing whether a change in your MS symptoms may be a true relapse? All right, are we ready to show the results? And thank you all for answering and participating. Wherever you landed is exactly where we're having this conversation. So we're going to start with the basics and go from there. We see we're right in the middle between somewhat confident and not very confident. So hopefully by the end of this, you will feel more confident. So let's talk about it. Dr. Rosenthal, some questions for you. We'll start with you. When clinicians say true MS relapse, what does that mean?
I know it's misleading, and as we go through things tonight, I'll just apologize on behalf of the medical community in advance that we have some odd terminology. There's certainly a gap in terms of like I think what we're thinking and what and the things that come out of our mouth. But true relapse, from our standpoint, means that there is a new area of inflammation going somewhere, in your spinal cord, your brain, your optic nerve, and so that really means that you have to understand how the disease behaves, right? So with relapsing MS being the most common form of MS, that means that you get these spots, lesions, scars, hyperintensities, all these words we use, they all mean the same thing. Um, in different parts of the central nervous system at different times. And they'd only stay actively inflamed for about 4 to 8 weeks, closer to 4 weeks, and the inflammation always goes away. In fact, when we don't see the inflammation go away over that period of time, we will start to consider alternatives from MS because that's just not how MS typically behaves. And so that lesion will go away and leave behind the scar. But when it's first there, there's that inflammation is there, and we could tell it's there because if there may be a symptom to go along with it, or if we do your MRI, we can see that it lights up with gadolinium enhancement. So when someone is having this true relapse, it means that somewhere along that central nervous system, there is a new area of inflammation, and I can tie those relapse symptoms that you're having to that new area of inflammation anywhere along the central nervous system.
Thank you. That's super helpful. But now we hear about pseudo relapses. How do we know the difference between the pseudo relapse and the true relapse?
So with the pseudo relapse, there is no new area of inflammation. And sometimes we can tell a pseudo relapse from a true relapse just based off of the symptoms. So if you think about that new area of inflammation, how likely would it be that you would have the same area of inflammation become reinflamed, the exact same spot? We don't really see that too much, right? And so a pseudo relapse is more likely to be symptoms that you've had before that then recur. And it may be a symptom that maybe is there all the time and that it becomes worse. So that may be, if somebody, has some trouble walking or maybe has pain or muscle stiffness, then that symptom becomes more pronounced. Or it may be something that you had in the past, it got completely better, but then it comes back, or you start to notice it, which can be very, alarming and scary for someone living with MS because you're trying to separate what should I be worried about and what should I not be worried about. From our standpoint, when we think it's a pseudo relapse, then we start to go down mentally a different pathway where we're trying to figure out, okay, why is this happening? Is it, someone sick, or they didn't get enough sleep, or they stressed out? We start to have to consider different etiologies for what's causing it, as opposed to a true relapse where we're going straight down the inflammatory MS pathway.
Okay, so that leads me to another question for you. You touched on it a little bit, but can you go more into what role other factors like heat, infection, stress, poor sleep, can play in temporarily worsening old symptoms?
Right. So all of those things are not typically your friend when you live with MS in terms of symptoms. And just because someone's exposed to those things, I always like to make it clear that it doesn't mean they're definitely going to cause problems. And this is where we get into everybody being so unique with regard to not only their symptoms, but how the symptoms behave. But if you look at, I'll talk about heat initially, because I think there's a lot of kind of, confusion about heat sensitivity in MS. And it's not that with MS you feel hot or you get hot more easily when we talk about heat sensitivity. It's just that when you do become hot, like any normal person would if you are sitting in a sauna, or if you are out in the middle of Georgia in the summer, if you're exercising, if you have a fever, everybody gets hot in these situations. But when you're living with MS and your body temperature rises, you have these symptoms that recur. And again, if you look at the normal, completely intact human body, when our body temperature goes up, the speed with which our nerves talk to our muscles and different parts of our body slows down. That happens to everybody. And that's how people get, very dramatic and extreme example of this would be like a heat stroke. If you get too hot, your body's eventually going to shut down because the communication slows down. But with MS, it's not that extreme. Your body isn't shutting down, but that nerve is not talking as fast. And sometimes that signal is not going through at all. And so that's where probably the most classic example of this heat sensitivity, or what we refer to as Uthoff's phenomenon, is with, optic neuritis. Someone's previously had some blurry vision or symptoms that are due to inflammation of the optic nerve, and then they get hot shower, or they're exercising and they're like, hey, now my eyes getting a little blurry. And it's just your body telling you that your body temperature has gone up. And in this particular example, I think it's important to know that you're not actually hurting anything. When that happens, it's not like the inflammation is coming back or it's spreading or you're causing the lesion to get worse. And so it's just a phenomenon that we see. But the heat is one that we see. And then whenever somebody's sick, think about whenever your body has to give its attention to something else, like trying to stay awake because you're too tired, or trying to fight an infection, or you're just super busy and stressed out and you're multitasking, you've got all these things going on. Anything that takes your body's attention away from itself can sometimes cause a pseudo relapse, because now you can't compensate as well for those baseline MS symptoms that you may be dealing with.
Wow, those are great examples. I know that heat one hits home, especially this time of year. I
Mhm.
want to ask Tracy, can you share of a time when you were uncertain about whether or not you were experiencing a relapse and what helped you to make sense of it?
Yes. One of the things that I feel is very, very important in understanding how the body is changing and how the MS is perhaps actively working in your body is to really diagnose and should I say document what those things that are occurring that you're seeing, the frequency of it, changes in the night, changes in the daytime. One of the things that I know for myself from a personal lived experience, I'm a woman of a certain age, and so I have talked to my PC doctor to try to differentiate it. Is this a MS situation or am I just going through perimenopause? Because again, a woman of a certain age, your body is doing all of these different changes. So for me, it took time for me to ask the questions to the right doctor, including knowing that I was experiencing some back issues and I had to actually divert my appointments now to a neurosurgeon because I had spinal stenosis. So differentiating between a neurologist standpoint of MS, is this really MS? Is this me going through the change, so to speak, of perimenopause, or is this something else that's occurring? And so just being very vigilant in documenting what those things are that you are experiencing in detail so that when you go to these doctor's visits, you can be very explicit in explaining, hey, doctor, I noticed that there's changes in my back. I know that I do have a diagnosis. Is this MS related? Is this perimenopause related? Or is this something entirely different? So I think being prepared for your appointments, and I know for some people out there that's going to take time. And I know sometimes that can be a bear in itself because now you got to make all of these doctor's appointments. You got to do all these co-pays, but you are worth it. And so just know that in order to get to the root of things, it may take time, but you coming to those appointments being extremely explicit and detailing what you are experiencing is going to be helpful.
That's great advice. Thank you so much, Tracy. And I want to pose a question to both of you. And Tracy, I think you touched on it, so I want to start with you, and then please, Dr. Rosenthal, pick up. What do you wish that people living with MS understood before they're faced with this uncertainty of pseudo relapse or relapse, true relapse?
One thing is that for me, my experience was when I got the diagnosis, it's not a death sentence, right? So I had to really understand that it can be managed. It was manageable, and that the medication these days is way different than my experience of growing up watching my mom with MS. And so for me, again, a personal lived experience. I watched my mom have progressive MS when I got my diagnosis. It was not confirmed with type. And so for me, just not taking it as such. But also, too, knowing that it's important for you to ask questions. Also know that the gradual changes look different on everyone because, as we already know, it is a snowflake disease. And so, uh, knowing what those subtle changes versus I think Dr. Rosenthal said it, those dramatic chronicle changes. So for me, and one of the things that I want to highlight about the smoldering MS, I didn't even know what that term was until earlier this year. After I know my doctor, my neurologist always has me going to MRI appointments every 6 months. That's pretty much her standard procedure. Every 6 months, she wants to see what's happening in the body. And then there was no, what we consider relapses. But she noticed that maybe if we do a metric to really measure the smoldering, then we could find a different issue. And then that's essentially what happened to me a few months ago. I was going to have, and I've again been diagnosed 8 years, so having multiple times of going to MRI appointments, no new lesions, no new scarring, but recently this year, having smoldering metrics done in the body, the doctor was able to realize that there was some progression happening within the body.
Mhm. Thank you, Tracy. Dr. Rosenthal, what would you want people to know?
That it's ahead of time that it's normal for it to be confusing. I think that especially when you're first diagnosed, you don't know what is what. You might not even be really clear on what a relapse is, depending on what your first symptoms were. And I try and tell individuals when they're first diagnosed that it takes time, and I let them know if you're not sure, call us, and we'll figure it out for you. Otherwise, it's incredibly overwhelming, and it takes a year or more to really get a sense of your body and your symptoms and how it behaves to certain triggers. And again, like we talk about this snowflake disease, that makes it really hard to try to get advice from other people, frankly, because what maybe sets someone else off doesn't set you off. But it's such a, this is, MS is such a nuanced, odd disease. And there was one question that came up that I want to try to address now before it gets too late, just to kind of make it clear. Someone asked, if a true relapse lasts between 4 to 8 weeks, can a pseudo relapse last for a month? And this is where things get confusing because we were talking about the symptoms can be different from when we were talking about the biology of what's happening. So again, with that true relapse, the inflammation that's in the brain or spinal cord or optic nerves only lasts 4 to 8 weeks, but those symptoms can last forever, right? So the symptoms from a true relapse can get all the way better, not better at all, or anything in between, even though that inflammation may have resolved in the brain, or when it does resolve, that scar is still there. A pseudo relapse, on the other hand, there is no underlying nervous system inflammatory correlate to go with it. And so that can last until however long whatever's triggering it is addressed, whether it's an infection or a stressor or heat. And so those are the things to keep in mind. And the other thing, and I can't remember if it came in the chat or in one of the questions, but someone made a comment of, do I need to avoid heat because of this heat sensitivity? And again, it's overwhelming because we're like, you have MS, you need to exercise, you need to move, but don't get hot because you got heat sensitivity, right? And then, so what do you do? And this is where, again, individualized and still, and then using common sense in terms of your own body. And I tell individuals, if you're heat sensitive, when you get heat sensitive, you're dragging a leg, don't go on a treadmill and run. That's not going to work out well, right? You're gonna fall. Don't go outside and run on uneven terrain if you know that's what happens, right? Maybe do something different, a stationary bike. Um, if your symptom is that your eye gets a little blurry, but you're still able to see, then go ahead, and if you want to try to push through it, you can, because again, it's not hurting anything. It's just the symptoms are there when you're hot, you cool off, and the symptoms get better. Same thing with showers. People will tell me if I take a hot shower, I'm tired for the whole rest of the day. Nothing was hurt, but now you gave up your whole day for that hot shower. But not everybody has that, right? So if showers don't make you feel bad, hot showers, then enjoy your hot showers. Again, very, very individualized.
Can I add something to Miss Wright, if I could? Now that I'm going back to the original question, I might have spiraled off. And what to blame it on, MS. So,
The brain
anywho,
fog.
a brain fall. Thank you. Another thing is important. I think Dr. Rosenthal brought that up too, is knowing your boundaries. Like you need to know if you have a jam-packed day and you know that doing this may influence the rest of your day, again, using wisdom to balance it out. As mentioned before, one of the things that on Saturday mornings, I usually leave it open because if I do decide that that's going to be a day that I want to go to the gym or I want to take a walk in my neighborhood, I need to pre-plan so that I can come home because I already know I'm going to need some rest after I take a bath or a shower. And so I always build that into the calendar. And so I think some of us really need to be understanding of our boundaries and knowing where our limits are so that we could prepare ahead of time. If you know that Saturday night you have this event or that you're going to attend socially, start thinking about how I'm gonna plan that out so I can get my rest either before and or after, things of that sort. So I just kind of wanted to add that little piece too about understanding your boundaries and where your limits are.
Absolutely. That's good. Thank you, Tracy. Um, Dr. Rosenthal, I want to touch on something that Tracy actually mentioned before with the smoldering MS. So people might hear these terms, smoldering MS or progression independent of relapse activity. What
Mhm.
do these concepts mean in practical terms?
Yeah, again, when we talk about, I will say smoldering MS has a little bit more of an actual, fairly defined definition. PIRA, or progression independent of relapse activity, has a ton of different. I mean, so that I say all that to say it already makes it confusing because you get different definitions of these concepts, but they are these concepts that have been getting a lot more attention lately. And so. I would say smoldering MS is kind of a type of progression independent of relapse activity. So when we talk about PIRA, that means that you're having worsening, but there is no evidence of relapse. So just like what Tracy was mentioning earlier, she's going to her visits and they're like the MRIs don't show any new lesions, but maybe she's still having symptoms or concerns. It's that disconnect where the person is feeling that progression, but there is no objective correlate on MRI for us to say this inflammatory disease is progressing or doing things or you're having relapses. And what PIRA does not tell you is why it's happening. Why is there progression independent of relapse activity? And it can be that the MS itself is progressing from a biologic standpoint. It could be that menopause is hitting in a crazy way and you're dealing with these hormonal changes. It could be, deconditioning. We see this sometime for whatever reason, maybe somebody has an injury and so they can't walk, a broken foot or something, and they're not able to walk for a period of time because their limb is healing, and then they try again and they're deconditioned, they're weak, right? So they've progressed, but it's not necessarily because the MS has progressed. So there's all these reasons that someone could progress, and so that's what PIRA is. There's some progression. There hasn't been a relapse. It doesn't really tell us why there's been progression. Smoldering MS is really talking about the biologic process, the inflammation that's happening, the compartmentalized inflammation that is happening within the brain that is contributing to the progression. And that is important now, I think, especially as we're looking at different immune therapies, because that's the missing piece. As neurologists, for most of our patients, we're really good now at addressing that relapse activity. For most patients, we can get the MRI to quiet down, stop new symptoms, and stop relapses. We do not have good options for that progression outside of that relapse activity. Um, and so a lot of again our new novel treatments are focused looking at that. And Tracy talked a little bit about trying to find signs and symptoms of that, or I should say signs rather, biomarkers is what we like to call them. And there are certain things that they're trying to look at on MRIs that will give us some indication that smoldering MS is happening. And that is something that, usually having someone that's very knowledgeable about MS and what to look for. Not every radiologist necessarily is going to know to read your MRI and look for those signs. And so it's important. I say all that to say it's not, I don't know that it's standard of care. I don't know that every radiologist will look for those particular signs, but they're out there and there's, again, these biomarkers that we're trying to find to kind of corroborate basically what you're feeling, when you come in, like, hey, it's not all in your head. There's something happening. Ultimately, the goal is you could take those biomarkers and then we have a intervention or treatment to help address it.
Thank you so much. That's helpful. And while we are talking about smoldering and you mentioned biomarkers, there's a question from the audience geared to Tracy. But also, I would love Dr. Rosenthal to kick in if there are some technical terms or something that we need to know. What are some of the smoldering metrics, Tracy, that your doctor used to evaluate you?
So here I live in Arizona. There is an independent company that has where you can go and you can get biomarkers for smoldering. I couldn't begin to tell you exactly. It's just an independent company that actually tests for those markers. So again, this isn't a place like LabCorp where you go get your or Sonora Quest where you get commonly your tests done for blood work. This is an entirely different company that looks for those things, even I think paternity testing. So it's an individualized company that looks for those things. And honestly, my neurologist tell me to go do something, I just do it. And so I trust her that much. To be honest, I go and she tells me what we're trying to look for. And again, it was brought to my attention earlier this year about smoldering due to the MRI not showing any new symptoms. And so I just go there, get it done, report back to her. She reevaluates everything and we talk it through. So it's not a lab core. It's not a place where you typically would go where there's multiple places for this blood work companies that are out here. I think it's something totally different. And again, I live in Arizona. I could come back and I'm not sure if that would help you, but I could probably tell you the name of that, after this for next time when we meet on the 26th, I can go back and give you the name of that company if that's helpful.
Mhm. Yeah, I think you might be talking about that Octave MS disease activity score.
Could
Um,
be Dr.
okay.
Rosenthal. That sounds very familiar. That sounds very familiar, I must say.
Yeah, so that says it's fairly new. It's not perfect. And it's something that either you have to go to like a third party and have it done, or some hospitals, we do it at Shepherd Center. We contract directly with them so that we're able to do it in-house.
Okay.
But it is a blood biomarker test. So it's again a blood test that looks at 17, 18 different biomarkers and it produces a score. And what that score will tell you is your chance of a relapse activity over the next 12 months. So it's really formed and FDA approved, really focused more on this relapsing still MS. But if you go into some of the subsets of those biomarkers and don't look at the score necessarily, and this is where you have to really know how to interpret each of those tests, it may give you some indication of if there's any sort of like neuroinflammation happening that could go along with it. Again, I think there's still a lot of data that needs to be in terms of like gathering it to see what it means for most people. One of the things that we look at for MRI that's really a biomarker or correlate for smoldering MS. There's really two things they're looking at. One is it's called PRLs or paramagnetic rim lesions. And so what they're looking for is to see in oh, we're getting into a little bit of again biology here, but with this compartmentalized kind of smoldering kind of MS, what they're thinking is a lot microglial activations, particular cell in the brain, and they kind of live on the outside of your MS lesions. And when they're activated, you can see it causes this kind of iron rim around the lesions, and you can see it. And it's something that we've worked with our radiologists in terms of getting them to report on it because it does give me some indication when I'm talking to somebody and they're like, "Hey, I'm having some progression." But we don't see any new lesions. If we see that sign, that can go along with the smoldering MS, and then slowly expanding lesions or SELs. Again, these are really subtle changes. So historically, when we think about MS, we're looking for new and active lesions, right? New and enhancing lesions. But now we're adding to that these PRLs and SELs that may tell us something different. Of course, the very annoying part here is that right now, when we see them, what are we doing with that information, right? Unfortunately, I don't have a drug that I say, haha, this is the drug that's going to stop that. But again, a lot of the drugs they're looking at right now, they're really trying. There's a huge focus on medications that will work in the CNS penetrant medications. They're able to go into where the brain and spinal cord live to exert its effect, as opposed to medications. A lot of what we use now, they kind of work peripherally, and indirectly that are able to make have their effect on having new lesions. And so again, it's not for lack of trying. There's definitely some new drugs that they're trying to look at that can get into the brain and hopefully affect those microglia and try to have an effect on smoldering MS and progression independent of relapse activity that's actually due to MS disease activity.
Thank you so much. And so the next question I had, and I think you touched on it, but maybe you want to talk a little bit more about it. Um, can MS change when someone is not having an obvious relapse? Like, tell us in lay terms a little bit, because you were heavy on the science, but what does that look like just
Hmm.
in life with the person with MS?
Yeah, it definitely changes, right? And so, if you look at the natural history of MS, how it just evolves over time, and again, this is for most people because everyone is so different. It tends to start out with real like extra relapses and new symptoms, and relapses tend to occur more often. And if you look at that as a timeline over time, the relapses become less pronounced, less frequent. But at that point, you may start to have more of this progression component kind of creep in. It doesn't happen with everybody, right? Some people may have a couple relapses in the beginning and then have nothing at all for the rest of their life. Some people skip the relapse part and they just kind of, have some progression. So it varies, but they're definitely it varies from person to person in terms of what that looks like, but someone can definitely have phases of MS that behave differently, phases of MS that are more inflammatory with regard to relapses. And it also changes for women going through in that perimenopausal period. We're looking at that a lot more too. It's not a coincidence that if you look at women living with MS, that around age 45, they start to feel progression happen. Oh, that it just happens to be when women are also going through. So there's other things happening. And then you also have, let's fast forward a little bit more, normal aging, right? So as you normally age, you're losing muscle mass and you're losing your postural reflexes a little bit and your endurance. And these are just normal things. There's a reason why, 90-year-olds aren't usually running up and down the stairs, right? And you take that in combination with the MS, then it does its own little thing too. So it gets really complicated and it definitely changes over time.
And so there are all kinds of factors that can, look like MS, BMS, agitate MS symptoms. What are some of the changes that should make a patient pause and start documenting what they may be noticing and talk to their doctor about it?
Anytime you're having a new neurologic symptom, we need to know about it. Even if we don't think it's MS, we need to know about it. But it needs to be determined, is this new neurologic symptom related to MS? And we do want to know about progression as well. And I completely understand that sometimes we don't have good answers for progression. But when we talked about peer, there's all these other things that can contribute to it. Some things we may have an intervention for, right? And so if there's progression, we don't want to, if there's something that we can fix or can address or can improve upon, we want to. So again, anything new symptoms we want to know about, progressive symptoms we want to know about, and it's something you may talk to family or friends about. And you're like, hey, I used to be able to like get to my mailbox and back with no break, and now I can't do that anymore. And then we also need to know about how our interventions, our medications are making you feel, right? The one good thing about having a lot more treatment options now is that we don't have to put up with as many side effects or, that sort of thing. And so we want to know about that as well.
Thank you. And Tracy, as a patient, what have some of these conversations looked like with your physician when you're talking about gradual or subtle changes that you may have experienced?
Absolutely. I talk to my neurologist. We have a really good relationship. So I'm very transparent. I'm very upfront. I used to be able to do a 5 mile walk. Now I can only get to the corner. What's happening? I started experiencing this pain, this pain. Is this related to MS? Is this something of concern? But again, going back to what I reiterated earlier, we have to be very intentional about how to separate the two, but know exactly what those symptoms are or things that we're experiencing, documenting those, and then really having those conversations with the appropriate professionals in regards to those things, because they're, as Dr. Rosenthal indicated, you have to weed those out. We're naturally aging, right? We have, of course, especially for women, those other symptoms. And then for me too, genetics, because genetics play a huge role to it, right? Didn't know that in my family, on my dad's side, something, was a common factor that pronounced itself. So I knew, okay, this isn't MS, this is something completely different. And so being able to weed that out by just making sure that you're intentional about what those symptoms look and feel like, how often are you experiencing those symptoms? And when you have those appointments, being very clear about these are the things that are happening. Can we, at least if we don't know exactly what it is, can you tell me what it's not? That kind of thing.
Absolutely. Thank you. Well, it sounds like communication on both sides is a super important
Mhm,
documentation and communication.
mhm.
Something that people ask about often is relapsing MS versus PPMS. So I want to take a moment to talk about some of those, the differences between the two. And so, Dr. Rosenthal, at a high level, how do relapsing disease courses and primary progressive MS differ?
Primary progressive MS typically starts with progression from the very beginning. So it's subtle. And if you look at the strict criteria for it, they'll say that, you need to have, like to have seen at least, a year of progression to kind of support it being progressive MS. But it's harder to diagnose for that reason. It's very sneaky, right? With classic relapsing MS, it's not very sneaky all the time. It can be, but it's like, one day I could see out of my eye and then I couldn't, right? It's a little harder to ignore a relapse where because it happens over a shorter period of time. Um, but with relapsing MS, you have these relapses every so often, but in between those relapses, things stabilize, right? With progressive MS, there's no relapses. There's just symptoms that come about and slowly get worse over time. But just to kind of make things, again, even more complicated, as an MS community right now, we're actually trying to move away from these terms because they really don't accurately describe the MS experience for most people, in that it's not these discrete categories where it's all relapsing or it's all progressive. Really, it's relapsing, it's all there, just to different degrees. And so it's more of a continuum rather than being these categories. And so I do think for those living with MS and those treating MS, we're going to see this pull back from these kind of previous definitions that we've been using for so long.
Interesting. Now I want to think about how I want to ask this next question very
No,
carefully.
oh, go for it. I mean, it's not going away tomorrow. And if you ask the
No, but
insurance
that's a
companies, they're never
great
going to go away because that's how we get our medicines approved.
yeah. No, it's good to know though that that change is coming and that we're thinking about this continuum and really looking at how the disease is presenting itself. But for the where we are right now,
Yes.
what might the differences between PPMS and relapsing MS mean for monitoring and conversations with your care team?
So they have huge implications for treatment, right? And treatment outcomes and what we're looking for. Progressive MS is hard to treat, and we don't have great options. And so, whereas with relapsing MS, our goal may be to completely halt things, we can't cure MS, but we can get it to just kind of stop being active. We can stop relapses and symptoms. When you're talking about progressive symptoms, we're looking at, trying to slow down progression. And that's a really hard thing to measure too, right? So if I have someone that comes in with progressive MS and then I put them on treatment, they still may be getting worse. But now I'm trying to ask them, like, hey, do you think you're getting worse slower than what you were getting worse before? That can take years to answer. And so it does make treatment and our approach to treatment different. We also don't have as many, with us not having as many options for progressive MS, we're a lot more, we have to unfortunately maybe put up with more side effects. I can't just switch you to something else. People with progressive MS are probably more likely to not be on a treatment for that reason. If they did maybe try the treatment that is available, and either felt like it didn't work or they couldn't tolerate it, I don't have options. And so those are going to be the main kind of considerations and barriers.
Okay, thank you. And so, Tracy, you shared that you live with PPMS, correct?
I shared that my mom had
Your mom,
PPMS.
I'm sorry.
Yes, that's
So, how
okay.
did learning more about whether it was her disease course or your own experience change questions that you ask or the way that you approach care?
Yes, so growing up watching my mom, I think she was early 40s of diagnosed. I was a preteen when she was first diagnosed. So I watched her from a teen all the way up to adulthood. I was able to look at my care a little differently because, again, going back to medicine and treatment, therapies were just not as prevalent back then as they are now. So we have many, many options. We have oral options. We have all types of variations of options that we can take. That wasn't available. So I treat things as, again, once I became diagnosed and got past the grief, because there was cycles in which we go through all of those changes, I just approach it now with so much more hope. I am a person who feels like just because this is part of my identity, this is not who I am in completion, right? Maybe it is, yes, that I have MS, but MS doesn't have me. I consider myself a warrior. I consider myself every day what it takes for us to get up and fight. And when I mean fight in the literal or maybe physical sense, I'm not sure where we're at, people out there, but I'm speaking solely of getting up and choosing to live and knowing that we have choices, right? Life is all about choices. I choose to live in gratitude um, for my huge belief and faith that I carry. I carry that outwardly, and knowing that this is again something that I'm dealing with on an everyday basis, but how I deal with it shows up in everything I do. I like to support individuals out there and be the advocate for them when they can't help them nurture and understand where they're at in their body and to accept it. One of the things that I had to grow through, and I'll be honest with you, Miss Wright, I'm doing that still, and that is accepting the new me because the new me changes sometimes daily. What used to be last year, you know, coming up on my 53rd birthday, I'm just like, I'm changing so much that now it went from what I couldn't do last year or what I couldn't do last month to what I couldn't even do yesterday. And so, but that's okay. I accept it. I move past that, learning to love me where I'm at in this walk. And I think that's the most important thing as MS warriors out there, we are ill family, we need to do is to really accept where we are in this path with this illness and know that it can't control us. It doesn't dominate us. And so that's what I choose to do.
Beautiful in a word. Thank you so much for that. Just want to give a note to everyone. Just a reminder, there is no single MS story. Your story is your own, and it's going to be different from anyone else's in this space, out there with MS, and that your disease course and the experience will vary. Still valid, but they vary. Um, let's talk about meaningful change and how we recognize it. Dr. Rosenthal, what changes in mobility, balance, dexterity, vision, cognition, or fatigue are worth tracking over time?
Oh gosh, I mean, they're all worth checking with tracking.
I was going to say the same thing.
Pick three. No, I'm kidding.
So,
Seriously.
I mean, say all the things you just said again?
Absolutely. Mobility, balance,
Mhm.
dexterity, vision, cognition, and fatigue.
Oh, all of it. And they're all of those things too are so there's so many different things that can contribute to them, right? Um, and so with vision, anyone, I would say everybody living with MS needs to have your vision checked regularly. And vision changes are so common and they're so variable. Like how you see at 10 o'clock may be completely different than how you're seeing at 4 p.m. And I think that is unfortunately, par for the course. I even tell my patients, I'm like, do not go get an eye exam on a day you're feeling great, but don't go when you're a day you're feeling terrible. Like go on as medium of a day as you can because you don't want the glasses to be too strong or too weak, right? Um, but it's also important just because of the normal changes that can happen with other comorbidities that can affect, vision, for example, other disease processes, age-related thing. With mobility and balance, we do want to know how things are changing, with your day-to-day functioning, and then context about how, if there's been any other changes. Have you not been as active? When we during the pandemic, everybody went from like living like this normal life where you like go grocery shopping or go outside and walk your dog or just these normal activities of daily living to like sitting in their house and like all the patients like all my patients were like they're like I'm getting weaker and my MS is progressing and that may have been true for some, but a lot of it was like this deconditioning, like, okay, hey, I haven't been moving as much. I couldn't go to my gym anymore, so I haven't been working out. And so we want to know all of that so that we can dig into it and try to find out why. Cognition and sleep and fatigue, it's just important making sure that all those other MS symptoms if somebody's having bladder problems and you're waking up to pee 5 times a night, like we need to get into that because that's going to affect your sleep and it's going to affect your cognition. We want to know about your mood because that's going to affect your sleep and it's going to affect your cognition. And so I would argue that it's not unreasonable to bring up like any concern to your neurologist just to kind of as a flyby because it may be directly related or it may be indirectly related. And we may say, hey, I can't really, that's something you need to talk with your cardiologist or primary care about. But we may say, hey, even though it's not directly MS related, it could be causing this, that, and the other. And so, yeah, all of it, all the things.
Don't minimize it. Talk about it. Ask the questions. Put it out there. Got you. No, that's so important. Tracy, how do you distinguish a one-off bad day from something that you think needs some attention and you need to talk to your doctor about?
Yes, so I work in education, as you've already shared. And so I'm currently in a position where I'm a principal in alternative schools. So my day stress level can be, way on 100 or it could be way down here. And so for that reason, I look at those things about what are some perhaps triggers that are happening throughout the day. Is this just a momentary? Um, experience, or is this pronounced like this is happening chronically? There is time over time where I'm experiencing some of these things. So I relate a lot of things to my day based upon my work. Also, too, I think it's important, again, going back to those social, for those who are, social, is it the activity that's motivating where you're feeling, or is it your stress level, your concern and your worry about psychologically some things that maybe you need to let go of? I mean, those all play a part in how we shaped and how we move in this world, right? And so that can affect how our MS shows up. If it's something that I'm seeing that I really see that there is a continuation of sorts, then I'm documenting that. Like this has happened 3 times out of this week. I need to, on the next visit, talk about this is what happened. This was the time of day, because I'm also looking at my time of day. Is it my mornings? Is it your evenings? Is it your afternoons? Is it your work related? Is it your psychological because you're worried about the kids or family, or you have some substantial experience? Maybe there's a loss that you're kind of still going through. All of those things play factors into how our MS shows up. And so we can't isolate the two. We just have to really differentiate. Is this something that's perhaps a momentarily situation versus something that's kind of long-term and pronounced and chronic, and it's been sustained over a period of time that I want to bring up these things to my doctor?
Those checkpoints are very helpful that you have for yourself. I'm sure a lot of the audience members are going to start asking themselves those questions to get through the day and kind of determine which way to look at it. Um, so what helped you to really trust your observations and communicate them clearly with your care team?
I'm still working that out. When you mean observe my observations, I think what I've gotten to a point of understanding where I'm at with my walk with MS, right? And that is over time now I'm learning how to differentiate those things. I know that here in Arizona, this is the second week of school. So for me, this is the second week of school for students and staff. I know that the first week, this week, and perhaps until we settle in, it's going to be pretty heightened. So I kind of prepared myself mentally for that and physically. I know my husband is like, because I usually just do, I come in high and then I'm straight in the bed because that's just currently where I'm at right now. But I know this is not going to be like this throughout the rest of the school year, right? And so I understand again, just knowing the balances of things of where I know I need to step back and have boundaries set for myself so that I can restore myself back to a healthy state of being versus other times where I know I need to show up because I know for work I have to show up a certain way. So I prepare myself the night before on how to do that. Here's an example. I and this might sound for old school people out there. I'm gonna be honest. I iron my clothes for the week, you all. I do. I'm old school, maybe because mom raised me that way. That you said, back in the day we didn't have uniforms, and so every Sunday I literally plan out my week by ironing my clothes for the entire week. So when I get up, I want to make my morning as smooth as possible. I have a regimen. I have a routine. I kind of stick to it. And if, for whatever reason it gets broken, then, I have to get back on and figure out where it was or what happened. So I think prepping as much as possible for those things that are coming down the pipeline is important so that you know what boundaries to set for yourself.
That's good. Thank you, Tracy. A whole week. I barely ironed any day.
I
I
was gonna
Um,
do.
say, I feel like really young people, like I don't know, we're gonna say 25 and below, they don't iron. Like if they can't knock the
No,
wrinkles out in the dryer, it's not
no.
it's
that's
not
not my age group, but I'm with them. Okay.
because I still iron.
I do too. I have an iron. Like, I don't understand why some people don't even own an iron. Like,
All
okay,
right.
all right.
That's a whole sidebar. We can talk about my wrinkle clothes later. Um, I want to hear from our audience. So we have another poll question. I also want to remind everyone that the Q&A is open. So please pop your questions in there. For those of you who have asked your questions, we see them and we will definitely get to as many as we can in the Q&A. So poll two, please engage if you'd like. You notice that old MS symptoms become temporarily worse on a very hot day and improved after you cool down. What might this be? I feel like there should be Jeopardy music. Give y'all a few more seconds. And if the results are in, go ahead and show them. Pseudo relapse, temporary symptom worsening seem to have the most votes. Um, Dr. Rosenthal, how we
Yeah,
do?
good. Most people got it right. So again, when the hints here that there's a kind of common trigger, right? The heat, it's a very hot day. And then the symptoms got better after you address the heat. So after you cool down, the symptoms get better. And so that goes along with a pseudo relapse, not there being a new area of inflammation or a new lesion, a new MS lesion. It's just old symptoms worse because it got hot.
Thank you so much. And Tracy, do you have any brief connection to that and your lived experience with the pseudo relapse?
So again, I live in Arizona, ladies and gentlemen, and for that reason, it is right now 110 degrees outside. So if you, of course, been to Vegas, you know that is the dry heat. That's the same kind of heat that we experience here in Arizona. So for me, it is equivalent to that. If I'm out and exposed too long, even if sometimes I manage my time. I go into the grocery store at 6 a.m., 7 a.m. so that I'm not in the heat at the height of the day because I get very disoriented. I do. When I am overheated, sweat profusely. I get disoriented. And so again, knowing when is a good time to manage your MS is the best way. And that is something that I do because heat, I'm very, very extremely sensitive to.
Well, thank you. And it's so important that we recognize our patterns, not necessarily try to diagnose ourselves from our checklist, but just to be aware of where we are, what things typically trigger our symptoms, and use that information to know when to involve our care team. We have another poll question for our audience. Want to hear from you all. Before today, had you heard the term smoldering MS or progression independent of relapse activity? All right, and some results, please. Okay, so we definitely have folks learning today about smoldering meds and Pyrrha, as Dr. Rosenthal calls it. Do you want to touch on these poll answers, Dr. Rosenthal?
I think that's pretty on par with what I think that you might not have heard the terms, but I think patients definitely describe the symptoms, and so it's not a new concept. Patients have been talking about Pura for a really long time. Again, I think we're just talking about it more in the medical community, so that as an area of need, essentially.
All right. Awesome. Thank you both so much. We are actually going to turn to the Q&A, as we do have some good questions in here. Definitely want to hear from our audience, so please continue to drop them in the chat. We also invite you to raise your hand if you prefer to just speak and engage with us. And whether you've just, ever wondered if this is relapse, is it a bad day, is something changing? This is a space to ask what we want to remind you, general questions to help us all understand more, but not necessarily your specific medical questions. So this one, Dr. Rosenthal, does smoldering MS have to do with the damage to the myelin sheath that can't be seen in an MRI?
Um, So I would look at smoldering MS. Don't think of it so much as like the location because everything is happening in that myelin sheath. It's more with the kind of cells that are activated, but to your point, yeah, it could easily be missed on the MRI. And again, they're trying to advance some of these MRI techniques to be able to pick up on these more subtle findings.
Okay, thank you. Let me see. So this one we hadn't touched on today, but someone would like to know, is trigeminal neuralgia common with MS?
Right. So we do see trigeminal neuralgia, not infrequently in MS. I'll say that most people, if you took all comers of people with trigeminal neuralgia, most probably don't have MS. So again, this is a symptom. If you look at MS, MS doesn't really own anything, right? In terms of like even optic neuritis or bladder problems or various symptoms. It's more the constellation MRI findings that go along with it. But for those who don't know, trigeminal neuralgia is when the nerve that gives you sensation to your face becomes activated and causes terrible pain to the side of the face. Just think about like the worst dental pain you could ever think of if somebody tried to like do something without anesthesia and it just happens. And
Mm.
um, it feels awful, but psychologically it's terrible because you're someone who deals with that can kind of just like live in fear of like not knowing when that next like shock of pain is going to hit their face, right? Um, and so it is something that we can see from MS if you happen to have an area of inflammation in the brainstem where that nerve originates. I will say still, when I have someone, even if they have MS that has trigeminal neuralgia, I will still look and see if there's another cause for it because sometimes a blood vessel or is hitting that nerve or some sort of other mass or lesion can be on that nerve. And again, this is one of those cases where you don't want to just automatically blame things on MS and you haven't really done the full workup. So yes, we see it with MS, but other things can cause it too. And I will say, hands down, if you are dealing with that pain, you need to talk to your doctor and absolutely get on treatment because the treatments work, and that kind of pain is not compatible with trying to any sort of quality of life.
Thank you. Tracy, I feel like you can probably answer this question, but certainly Dr. Rosenthal, if you want to talk about, add to Tracy's answer, please feel free. So this person is also in Arizona. I don't
Mhm.
know if it's pronounced Mesa or Mesa, so I'm just going to keep it
Mesa.
Arizona. Mesa, thank you.
Okay.
I'm over here in DC, y'all. I don't know what's going on over there on the West Coast. How do you differentiate between heat intolerance with MS and just the fact that it's 110 degrees outside?
That's a good question.
I'll tell you, I don't think my body discriminates between the two because sometimes I will tell you that it is 110. Yes, I think there is a huge coming. Originally, I am from Chicago, Illinois, so I know what humidity, I was raised in humidity, so I know what humidity it feels like. And so I just know there is a true difference. I know some people have described it as walking into an oven when you are in Arizona because it's so hot that you walk into an oven. It feels like the heat is on. It's a different kind of heat exposure. But for me, I'm learning that, to be honest, my heat is heat, regardless if it's humidity or not. And my body is not responding well to it, irregardless. I look at MS as if you were to cut open a cord and those frayed wires. That's how my imaging of MS looks for me, Dr. Rosenthal. I've always associated myself with that. If you were to cut a wire and that myelin sheet or that thickness over it, when you have exposed wiring, it's like when I'm hot, um, my body just shuts down, I get disoriented. Again, still a woman of age. If I'm feeling like I'm having a hot flash, whoo, again, the same response. So my body is just responding to heat overall.
Good answers. Thank you for that. That dry heat is something different. Mm-mm. And humidity is its own beast too. But
Yeah.
yeah, that dry heat, Jesus.
But is there really a certain thing as perfect heat? No. So it's
No,
like which of
no.
the heat which of the heat do you want? You want the kind that's dry or you want the kind that's wet? That's all.
Fair. So question for you, Dr. Rosenthal. If a truly relapse lasts 4 to 8 weeks, can a pseudo relapse last much longer for months at a time, perhaps?
So again, I think, and I'm glad this question came up so I could just re-clarify that when you talk about that, when I said that 4 to 8 weeks, I was not talking about the symptoms because the symptoms can last a day or forever, right? All I mean is that all those inflammatory cells in that lesion is there for 4 to 8 weeks. So the lesion is inflamed for 4 to 8 weeks. And when I say lesion's inflamed, when they give you the contrast for your MRI, um, that contrast will go into the inflamed lesions, and the non-inflamed or older lesions it will leave alone. And so that's how we're able to try to tell if it's new. That part lasts 4 to 8 weeks. The symptoms they can do what they want to do. Sometimes you could have an inflamed lesion and there are no symptoms at all, right? And that's when sometimes we do an MRI and we're like, hey, you've got a active lesion. And the person's like, I don't have any symptoms. That lesion just happened to be in a spot where, it didn't really cause a symptom. And so the symptoms can present very differently from what's actually going on in your central nervous system. So yeah, I wouldn't expect things to like a symptom from a relapse to progress, like it's just getting worse and worse and worse and worse, like over months. That would be atypical. But the symptoms can persist. With a pseudo relapse, it can persist. I think the question was, can it last for months? It can last for months if the offending trigger isn't addressed, right? But if you've addressed what should have been causing that pseudo relapse and the progression is still persistent, then there's something else going on that may be progressive MS or something else.
Thank you for that clarification. Tracy, from your experience of being a support person for your mom and a current patient, where your husband shows up as your support partner, how can caregivers support their loved ones during relapses? What can we go back and share with our support partners?
And so my question I always pose is, what do you need? What do you need in this moment? How can I be of help? And sometimes they may be hard to define. Even for my spouse, He'll ask those questions, and sometimes I may just be honest and say, I don't know what I need, but right now maybe I just need some space. Maybe I just need some time. Maybe I just need um, a warm bath. Maybe if you could just rub my legs, because I'm always having problems with my legs. My back and my legs are severely always bothering me, so to speak. And so for that, if you could just rub my legs. If you can't articulate, then sometimes you just need time to step back and figure out what it is you want. But if you can articulate, it is something that you should practice. What do you need? How can I show up for you? What can I offer you? What do you need in this moment? How can I be of service?
Thank you, Tracy. That's really good. I know these people, they love us and they want to help us. They don't always ask the question.
Hmm.
So for the person who asked, thank you for asking. Because sometimes, like,
Hmm.
just ask. We will
Hmm.
tell you.
I'll add one thing, and Tracy, you could tell me if I'm wrong, but sometimes I'll tell like the care partner rather than sometimes not even just asking, I'm like, just do it. Like sometimes I feel like when you don't feel well, sometimes you can't even think of like what you need. And
So,
so sometimes you might just they just need to like just like if there's meal if the meal isn't prepared, let's just get her done, you know?
but you could get tripped up on that. So
Yeah.
again, Friday would be married 27 years. And so sometimes I think he's a mind reader, right? And so I'm like, isn't it obvious what I need? But the reality is, it's not. And I
Mhm.
have to be okay with that. I have to be okay with, okay, you still need some, I don't want to belittle it by saying coaching or mentoring, but you still need me to show up and say. And I have to respect that piece because, right, in my mind, Dr. Rosenthal, I'm thinking, isn't it obvious what I need right now? Like, are you kidding me? But in all fairness, he's not a mind reader. He's not, telepathic. And so I have to articulate and say, this is what I need at the moment.
Hmm. Yeah, it's good.
There's one in the chat, and y'all, the Q&A is probably the best place to put questions. The chat is going to move pretty quickly. But can an MRI that showed lesions that weren't active over a year ago progress to active a year later or over time?
That would be atypical. I've learned not to say no with MS. Like I've been proven wrong too many times. Goofy things happen. But just if there's a lesion, that indicates that that part of the brain has essentially kind of been destroyed, right? So for things to get in there to create new damage, it's like, kind of damage of what necessarily. We don't see that so much. Sometimes you can have a lesion really close to another lesion or, or around that area that can reactivate. But I don't typically see an old lesion become reactive later. That would be atypical.
Thank you for that. Um, I heard MS can stop progressing around your 60s. Is that right? Sounded like another piece of hope.
Oh, yeah. So MS can stop, I won't say progressing, maybe isn't the best term, but it can stop relapsing. And for most people, it does eventually stop relapsing. The other thing I would say, the 60s. I think people would love to have this kind of like magic age where things just kind of shut off. But for some people, it stops relapsing in the 40s. For some people, it's the 50s. Some people, it just never really stops. I will say for the vast majority of people, by the time you kind of get into 60s or 70s, things are starting to calm down from the relapsing. But we don't just look at the age. And the age is important because part of the reason it probably stops relapsing is as you get older, your immune system naturally becomes weaker. And that's for everybody, whether you have MS or not. Your immune system naturally gets weaker, which is why they say elderly people get sick more often. Um, but the earlier someone is in their disease course, the more active it is. So if you have somebody that was not diagnosed with MS until their 50s, they're different than somebody who's been diagnosed in their 20s. By the time they're 50, they've had MS for 30 years, whereas this person's had it for, a year or something. So I'm going to treat them differently in terms of how I expect the disease to behave. But there is definitely hope. And most people living with MS, when they get to their ripe old age and get ready we say MS does not affect your quantity of life. So when that time comes for you, most people are not still on their MS treatment. You're going to get off for one reason or another. People get off of their MS treatments as they get older. And that may change over time if we have options for the progressive part of MS that we may keep people on longer because MS can progress as you get older. But for most people, it stops relapsing. And so if the medicines work for relapsing and you're older and you're not relapsing anymore, then we say, I don't want to give you this treatment because I don't know if it's doing anything.
Thank you. And everyone, we have about 3 minutes left for questions. I do see quite a few in the chat and in the Q&A. We will answer as many as we can before we get to the wrap up, if you will. Also, appreciate the medical questions that are being asked, the individualized questions. We will, continue to encourage you to talk to your care provider about those things that are related to your specific symptoms. Um, Tracy, question for you. If you are not being heard when you are explaining something to your doctors, what do you do? How do you manage that?
Well, first, that's never happened to me. But if it's happening to you, then you are not in the right setting. And I would explore other options as far as physician number one. That's the long-term goal. But in that immediate moment, you need to tell the doctor, pause, stop, listen, because I have an issue. Like you have to be your own self-advocate and be very clear about what your expectations are when you come to them for your treatment. Now, again, you are your best advocate. You have to set the tone that you are the priority in that session. You are the priority in that session, right? So for that reason, if it's a matter of over talking and the doctor is not listening to you, then you politely say, I'm gonna need you to stop and just listen and make them hear you out. And again, so that you are seen, heard, and valued and respected, because you are the patient, you are there to seek information. And for that reason, you have to be that person to speak up and really be firm and assertive as to what you're there for. Again, if you feel like the relationship is frayed and you don't, because, trust is a big factor and you don't feel like you're getting anywhere with that physician, there is always opportunities for you to look for another physician who will see and hear you clearly.
I like how you said opportunities. Fire that doctor. No, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Dr. Rosenthal, a similar question for you. How do you ensure you are listening to your patient and not being dismissive of them if they're having trouble trying to explain how they are feeling, whether they know it's a relapse or not?
Mhm. I when someone's, especially if someone's kind of talking to me and it's like rapid fire, I try to write down like little keywords of like notes. Um, and sometimes I think to myself, oh, I'm already kind of planning, okay, this is what I'm going to do for this. I need to address this. And sometimes I see things and I'm like, oh, and in my mind, frankly, I'm like, oh, that's not something that I need to, that I'm worried about from an MS standpoint, but I still write it down. And then I go through my own little questions I ask about, I go bowel, bladder, we go through our little things. And then I go back and we address each one. And if it's something that I think is not related, I explain why or I explain what could be causing it. And if it's something that is a symptom where it's like it still needs to be addressed, I try to give some guidance on how to go about doing that. And so at the end of the day, I think that's where you highlight it's that communication piece. So in my mind, I could think, oh, not it, that's not an MS thing. But if I don't explain why I think that, then the patient's feeling dismissed. So the communication is so important.
Thank you. And so, for the person who asked the question about my doctor's not listening, take a cue from Dr. Rosenthal. This is what should be happening. They should be paying attention to you. They should be helping you to fill in some of those blanks. They should be patient with you, taking notes. Like, if they're not doing those things, there's an opportunity, as Tracy said. Find another doctor. Thank you both. Thank you everyone for asking your questions. We want to go ahead and do some closing takeaways so we're respectful of everyone's time tonight. Dr. Rosenthal, what is one thing that you want someone to remember when they notice a change in their MS?
I want them to remember that there are just possibilities. And I think that's important from a mental health standpoint too, right? Because I think it's sometimes, especially early on in anxiety, we kind of will catastrophize certain things. Um, so to understand, like even in your mind, as a doctor, I have my differential diagnosis, and as a patient, you should have that too. But that does mean that for, living with MS, you should work to have a good understanding of what MS is in general, but then also what it is for you as an individual and how it affects you. And then like we've already talked about, like Tracy has emphasized, taking that information and advocating for yourself and getting the answers you need in order to feel comfortable with where you are.
Thank you. Tracy, what do you wish someone had told you earlier about learning your own patterns and trusting what you notice?
I wish someone had told me earlier to document my patterns and behaviors, but I also wish that someone had encouraged me and told me that in the effort of being your best caregiver for yourself, it is important for you to document, and track patterns, changes, and know that even though it's evolving or whatever is happening with evolution and evolvement of your body, that it's okay. It's okay. There can be an answer for it. Again, going back to what Dr. Rosenthal said about not catastrophizing or losing it, your body's going to go through constant changes as we age and progress. And you just have to be patient with yourself, be merciful to yourself, and know that it's okay. And you can get some help along the way.
That was lovely. Thank you so much, Tracy. Thank you, Dr. Rosenthal. So, tonight has been about awareness and clarity, understanding what might be happening in our bodies. In the next session, we will move from understanding to action and what to do when something changes, how to track it, when to contact your care team, how to prepare for appointments, and how to advocate for what you need. But before we conclude, we'd like once again to thank ANI Pharmaceuticals and Novartis for supporting today's educational program and their commitment to improving education and awareness for people living with multiple sclerosis. We also thank our speakers and to each of you for joining today's conversation. Thank you again, Dr. Rosenthal. Thank you again, Tracy, for joining us tonight. Um, Please remember to register for session 2 if you have not. And the post-program survey will be coming to you, so please send that back to us. We need that feedback to be able to give you amazing programming in the future. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Have
We
a
have
good
a video
night.
from our CEO.
As we come to the close of today's program, I want to sincerely thank you for spending your time with us. Whether you joined us as someone living with a chronic illness, a care partner, a family member, community advocate, healthcare professional, or ally, we hope today's conversation has left you feeling informed, encouraged, and empowered. At We Are Ill, we believe education creates confidence, community creates strength, and together they help transform the way people navigate life with chronic illness. We hope you leave today with new knowledge, practical tools, and a reassurance that you are not alone on this journey. Before you log off, there's one final request that makes a tremendous difference. Please take just a few moments to complete our post-program survey. Your feedback helps us understand the impact of today's program, improve future educational offerings, and demonstrate the value of this work to our partners and supporters. Simply put, your voice helps make programs like this possible and helps us reach even more individuals and families in the future. We also hope you'll stay connected with We Are Ill by joining us for future programs, sharing these opportunities with others who may benefit, and following us on Instagram and Facebook. Thank you again for spending your time with us. Until next time, take care and be well.
You're broken down and tired of living life on the merry-go-round, and you can't find a fighter, but I see it in you, so we gon' walk it out. Move mountains. We gon' walk it out and move mountains. And I'll rise up, I'll rise like the day. I'll rise up, I'll rise unafraid. I'll rise up, and I do it 1,000 times again. And I'll rise up, I like the waves. I'll rise up, in spite of the ache. I'll rise up, and I do it 1,000 times again. For you, for you, for you. The silence isn't quiet, and it feels like it's getting hard to breathe. And I know you feel like dying, but I promise we'll take the world to its feet. Move mountains, bring it to its feet. Move